Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Raymond Yeung. Here are tonight's top stories. Hong Kong to cull hamsters following the second Delta case in a week. The city confirms 18 new infections today, with 11 of them local transmissions. And Beijing takes steps to stop the spread of the COVID ahead of the Winter Olympics. Thousands of hamsters in Hong Kong will be culled after a pet shop customer became the city's second confirmed Delta case this week. Health authorities say the customer and a store employee may have caught the virus from hamsters imported from the Netherlands. Yeung reports.
At a press conference today, the government announced the mass culling of thousands of hamsters across the city. Anyone who purchased one of the small furry animals on or after December 22nd has been strongly advised to hand the pet over to the Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department. Owners have to be tested and will be quarantined if their hamsters return a positive COVID result. All pet shops selling hamsters must close and surrender the animals for testing and euthanization. They will not be allowed to reopen until the government is satisfied with the test results of other animals they sell. And the import of small mammals into the city has been temporarily suspended. The tough measures came after an employee of the Little Boss pet shop in Causeway Bay was confirmed with the Delta variant earlier this week. The government had no clue how the 23-year-old woman became infected until nearly 80 animals in her store were tested. 11 samples, all from hamsters, were COVID positive. Officials now believe 2 batches of around 2,000 hamsters from the Netherlands are problematic.
They're excreting the viruses, and the virus, they can infect other animals, and also they can infect other hamsters and also human beings. So we don't want to cull all the animals, but we have to protect public health and animal health, and we have no choice. We have to make a firm decision.
Health authorities have also decided to euthanize all animals from the Little Boss pet store and an animal warehouse in Tai Po. A 67-year-old customer who visited the shop on January 8th became the second confirmed case in this outbreak, while her husband tested preliminary positive. Her daughter, who has tested negative, had bought a hamster from Little Boss on January 4th and returned with her mother 4 days later to shop for a cage. Yeung, HKIBC.
Hong Kong recorded 18 COVID cases today, most of which were contracted locally. The Silka Seaview Hotel cluster has grown, with members of 2 families infected. Macy Mock reports.
Health authorities said Hong Kong had 18 COVID cases today, 11 locally transmitted and 7 imported. 9 are connected to a 43-year-old woman who stayed at the Silka Seaview Hotel in Yau Ma Tei. She contracted the Omicron variant earlier this week. 5 of today's local cases are her family members living in Tung Moon House in Tai Hang Tung Estate. They include a man, his daughter, and 3 sons. All 5 of them were not vaccinated. 2 of the children study at the Delia Memorial School Broadway in Mei Fu. The school is suspending campus activities for 14 days starting from tomorrow. 4 members of another family living in Po Wah Court in Cheung Sha Wan were also infected. The man and his wife both had 2 BioNTech jabs. There were also 10 preliminary positive cases today. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
Health Chief Sophia Chan says it's too early to tell if social distancing measures will be adjusted when they expire after the Lunar New Year. Her views were echoed by Chief Executive Carrie Lam, who hinted that suspended businesses may be able to resume if all future customers are vaccinated.
For the time being, we have no plan to relax what we have already announced for implementation. But going forward, Of course, we will adjust our measures. About adopting vaccine bubble for an earlier resumption of business, we will certainly listen to what the sector has to say. But in fact, the idea was volunteered by the trade. When they heard that we might be imposing more social distancing measures, I heard the trade, including the restaurant trade and the beauty parlor trade, they actually volunteered that. Why didn't the government allow us to operate on the basis of vaccine bubble? We could ask our customers to get vaccinated before offering them the service.
Carrie Lam has also vowed to carry out a thorough investigation into a birthday party that embarrassed the government. Several senior officials attended the celebrations earlier this month and were quarantined when it was learned that the revelers included 2 infected people. Macy Mock reports.
A day after Secretary for Home Affairs Casper Cho was spotted leaving Penny's Bay following 14 days of quarantine,
就住出席呢個宴會嘅調查呢，
the chief executive vowed to pursue the investigation into a birthday bash that triggered a political scandal. 15 senior officials were at the Wan Chai party that was linked to 2 confirmed COVID cases. Carrie Lam said society needs to know the truth, and she will explain to the public exactly what happened when the investigation is completed. Cho, Director of Immigration Ao Ka Wang, and Alan Fong, the political assistant to the Secretary for Development, all left Penny's Bay yesterday after quarantine for close contacts was cut from 21 days to 14. They will undergo 7 days of home isolation before resuming work next week at the earliest. Lam added that the government is investigating whether Cathay Pacific had violated any exemption arrangement for cargo flights. This came after 2 former Cathay flight attendants who contracted the Omicron variant were arrested and charged with breaching quarantine restrictions. They returned from the United States last month on board cargo flights, allowing them to self-isolate at home instead of hotel quarantine. The pair have been released on bail and will appear in Two Moon Magistracy and Eastern Magistracy on the 9th of next month. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
Quarantine exceptions for people coming into Hong Kong from Zhuhai port ended today because of a COVID outbreak in the mainland city. Beijing, meanwhile, is barring the general public from the Winter Olympics as the number of cases in the city rose to 3. Chloe Feng reports.
With the Winter Olympics just around the corner, Beijing is on high alert against COVID. Tickets for the games that kick off on February the 4th will not be sold to the general public. Instead, selected groups will be invited to attend unsupervised trips. The new arrangements came after the capital detected its first case of the Omicron variant. Authorities said the virus might have come through an express letter sent from Canada on January the 7th. It reached Beijing 4 days later via the United States and Hong Kong. Traces of the Omicron variant were found on the letter and 5 packages after testing. Postal employees who handled the mail tested negative but have been quarantined. People were advised to stop buying goods from overseas and to wear masks and gloves when opening mail from high-risk countries. 2 more COVID cases were confirmed in Beijing this afternoon, taking the capital's total to 3, with 1 preliminary positive. The mainland, meanwhile, reported 127 locally transmitted cases yesterday, down from 163 on Sunday. Tianjin, which is an hour away from Beijing, saw the number of infections plunge from 80 to 18. But Anyang in the central province of Henan hit a 10-day high of 94 cases. Measures were tightened in Guangdong province, which registered 5 infections, all in Zhuhai. From today, anyone setting off for Hong Kong from Zhuhai Port via the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge will be quarantined on arrival in the SAR under the Return to Hong Kong or Come to Hong Kong schemes. Chloe Feng, HKIBC.
Australia has registered another grim record, 77 COVID deaths in the past 24 hours. The fatalities were in 3 states, with the majority in New South Wales, which also had almost 30,000 new cases.
Well, today is a very difficult day for our state. In the last 24 hours, we've had 36 people die with COVID-19. We shouldn't forget behind every one of those numbers is a loved one who may have passed away or somebody who's in hospital or in ICU and going through a very difficult time.
Victoria State declared a code brown emergency as hospitals are nearing the brink of collapse. In Japan, Osaka Prefecture saw new cases jump by 6,000, pushing the national tally to a record high of over 26,000. This came as Prime Minister Fumio Kishida vowed to crush the virus by accelerating the country's booster program. But initial data from Israel suggest that a 4th COVID dose may not be enough to fend off Omicron, despite raising the antibody level. And coming up after the break, Hong Kong's unemployment rate falls to a 2-year low.